What is going on, YouTube? It is your boy Faithful to God, and I am here tonight to basically bring out I don't know how else to explain this. This is actually a very interesting hangout. You know, Judah Natzarah has finally addressed our initial video where we showed his misrepresentation of the Hebrew language and the fact of the matter that he seems very incognizant of a lot of the things that we mentioned. So he decided to make a video entitled, and this is the reason why I kind of opened the way that I did, because there's really no way to explain the disjointedness in his response, which was basically a video entitled "Hebrew is not a language of the Torah or of the ancient Israelites." So tonight we're going to be refuting his assertion and showing that he really has no idea what he's talking about. And I don't mean this in a disrespectful manner. I just think that at this point, you know, the conversation seems to be fruitless in a sense, because we're dealing with an individual who seems to be a little disingenuous about what he's talking about. But, you know, I won't get into that. I'll just go ahead and hand things off to the brother Jay. Have Jay give everybody an introduction out there.
You.
Yep, man.
What's going on, brothers and sisters? The Lord has allowed us to convene once again here on YouTube, Google Live. And, you know, you guys definitely be in for a treat tonight, man. You know, the two brothers going to be going in for y'all regarding Judah Natzarah and this whole, his misunderstanding of Hebrew. You know, this is one of the many things he don't understand. And so I'm going to go ahead and get it off to the brothers. But peace to my brothers and sisters, man.
But before we do that, I definitely wanted you to kind of give people there an update on your album, you know, just to let people know about that, because we talked about it the last time. So
yeah,
you have an album.
Yeah, man.
Entitled AD.
Yeah, AD, like 70 AD. Stands for After Deception, of course. It's the first album that I'm dropping, you know, as Jada producer, since coming fully out of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement. You know, so this project, you know, I've been working on it. I'm halfway done with it right now. And so if everything continues the way on the track it's on, then Lord's will, I'll have this project done by the time I want to have it done, and then I can put it out, which I'm planning on mid-March for the album itself to come out, or very early April. But the singles, Lord's will, next month start coming out. So you guys look out for that. So that's AD, standing for After Deception by Jada Producer, album that's coming out soon.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that. And yeah, man, whenever that comes out, definitely going to be promoting it on the channel so everybody can get a chance to check it out. All right. So thank you for being here tonight, my brother. And also we have Abu, who is a member of Shield Squad, Christian apologist. What's going on, Abu? Say hello to everybody out there.
Good evening. Good evening.
Now, Abu, could you kind of give everybody a brief synopsis before we actually get into the discussion on how we got to this point?
All right.
For anybody who may watch this video, this might be their first encounter with our discourse with Judah Natzarah. You kind of give a overlay of how we got to this point.
Sure. I'm going to take it a little bit before him as well. I'll mention how our interactions with the gentlemen who are within the One West stream preceded it and relates to it. So for those who don't know, within the broad spectrum of One West Hebrew Israelite groups, within the broad spectrum of Hebrew Israelite groups, there's a subset known as One Westers, and they have a distinct approach to the Hebrew language. They claim to have the true Hebrew, the ancient Hebrew, and it's a system. Basically, the only difference between their version of Hebrew, which they called Lashon Kodash, and the and more standard forms of Hebrew is one of pronunciation. It's not really a difference in grammar, but it's one of pronunciation, where they insist that every Hebrew character can be vocalized in only one way. Now, myself and also Faithful to God have been disputing this and attempting to engage in dialogue and even debate of some sort with various One Westers on this subject for years now. Me for quite a few years as well. Recently, in the last few years, as the Israelite thing has sort of spread on the internet and is no longer centralized at all, you see people tweaking it here and there. And there's a gentleman named Judah Natzarah. He's sort of the he doesn't like to be called the leader, but he's sort of the guy at the helm of this group called the TORAH, and he essentially pushes Lashon Kodash, which is this same system of Hebrew, but there's slight differences. And like I said, as I tried to allude to, being that it's no longer centralized, you see different people slightly tweaking it a little bit. Different people have different versions of this form of Hebrew that has only one sort of vocalization for every character, and it's usually ah. Everything's ah, 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 ah. So the aleph can only be pronounced ah, the bet can only be pronounced ba, and so on down the line. Abba, gada, etc.
Right.
And so,
and for those who, real quick, if I could just interject very quickly, for those who don't know, Judah Natzarah heads up a group, again, as the brother pointed out, entitled Toranites. They are Tanakh only Hebrew Israelites. So they wouldn't hold to the New Testament as the majority of, or I would say the vast majority of one Westers do. They reject the New Testament, and yet they still hold on to doctrines that the one Westers promote. For example, the white man being Esau doctrine, the fake Hebrew. If I'm not mistaken, there's even allusions to the 12 tribes chart, breakdown, and so on and so forth. Although they would have slight revisions, and even in the so-called Hebrew dialect, there's variance in what they promote versus what the one Westers promote. But I'll let you continue on so the audience can get a general idea of what's going on.
thank you very much. So more recently, we started getting into discussions with Judah Natzarah on the subject of Hebrew, and we've had a little bit of back and forth. There was an attempt to set up a debate between Faithful to God and Judah Natzarah on this subject. Unfortunately, they reached some sort of an impasse, and that didn't come about. I've tried to get him to have a correspondence with me because I think I'm a firm believer of the adage that, excuse me, forgive my throat clearing. I'm a firm believer of the adage that clear writing requires clear thinking, and that when you have a correspondence, you can really get a sense of how well structured a person's thought process is on a subject. So I've tried to invite him to engage in a correspondence with me, whether it be on social media or some other forum. And we briefly had a bit of a correspondence going on Vocab Malone's Facebook forum. And we've saved that entire correspondence for anyone that's interested. We can send it to you, or we can give you links if you're connected to Vocab's forum on Facebook. But so that sort of fell through. The correspondence petered out before we could really make progress. And since then, we've had a little bit of back and forth on the videos. So, for example, last August is really where it started to kick off with the videos, because Vocab Malone.
On Vocab's channel.
Sorry, go ahead.
Right. Yeah, on Vocab's channel. Right, go ahead.
Yeah. So on Vocab's channel, what happened was Vocab appeared last August in a Torah Nights Google Hangout, and they were asking him about God, and they were using the Lashon Kodash pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton, and Vocab Malone insisted. He explained that of course he believes in God. He believes in the God of the Bible. He just doesn't use their particular pronunciation of the Tetragrammaton. He rejects Lashon Kodash. And so they attacked him on that. There was a video titled Vocab Malone Gets Destroyed Again. I think we're going to mention later in this video, in this discussion. And then Vocab Malone asked me to come on a show that he did titled Lashon Kodash Takedown or something like that. And we did that. And then since then, when the debate between Faithful to God and Judah Natzarah fell through, Judah Natzarah made a video attacking Faithful, attempting to teach him on this subject, which, by the way, Judah Natzarah rejects the phrase Lashon Kodash, but he attempted to teach Faithful when really Faithful has been familiar with this subject for quite some time as well. I know at least he and I have been discussing it for close to 3 years now. And so we made a recent video titled something to the effect of Judah Natzarah's Misunderstanding of Hebrew, which was addressing his attempt to teach Faithful. Mm-hmm. He was silent mostly for, since then, but he recently made a video, and so we're going to discuss it briefly today. Although, to be fair, his new video really didn't address any of the arguments in our video, and it's largely putting forth some very strange arguments and then a lot of insults. I mean, it needs to be said that his video. Yeah, go ahead, please do.
Yeah, his videos are filled with ad hominems. To finish off your thought, the thing is that we called it in the first hangout that we did. We said that, well, at least I called it. Let me correct myself. I said I wouldn't be surprised if his response video ends up being like the initial video where he's going to go out on a limb to basically ad hom me or even yourself or whoever else and basically ignore the bulk of the arguments and just basically go into full insult mode. And then perhaps maybe deal with certain things that have nothing to do really with the topic. And in essence, that is what he did. He made a response video, I want to say 3 weeks later. So I believe we did ours in mid-December, and he did his in early January, right? January the 7th, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
In essence, what he ends up doing is the exact thing that I said he would do. Doesn't really deal with any of our, questions or arguments. He basically ignores that and casts doubt on the usage of the term Hebrew. So he basically just erects a straw man and just attacks it and burns it up. And so now what basically what we're going to try to do is highlight the mistakes that he made. Really there's Abu, if you could kind of interject on this one. There really isn't much there to deal with, right? There really is not a lot there to really interact with, right? So it's amazing to think that somebody who's making a response video, right? If you're gonna respond to somebody's arguments against you, you're gonna want to actually interact with the arguments, right? Which he clearly didn't do. But if you could go ahead and kind of go into that, and then we'll set things off, man.
Well, yeah. So a surprisingly huge chunk of his video was dedicated to the subject of essentially whether or not the Hebrew word, whether or not the English word Hebrew, Hebrew, whether or not the word Hebrew, which is an English word, appears in the Hebrew text of the Hebrew Bible, in the Tanakh. And it's a bizarre argument. Like he'll point to like texts that say Ibrit and he'll pronounce it a Barayath or something like that, or texts that say Yehudit and he'll say, oh, that's Yahawadath. But he keeps on saying, well, I don't see Hebrew here, I don't see Hebrew there, I don't see Hebrew there. And it's a very strange argument. In the lead up to this doing this hangout, I was discussing it with Faithful, and I was saying it would be analogous to getting a book about the Spanish language written in Spanish and continuously pointing to places where the book refers to the language as Espanol and saying, well, I don't see the word Spanish in there. It's a strange thing. Judah Natzarah has used the word Hebrew throughout his videos for years. He's been using the word Hebrew. But when it came to the point of mounting some sort of response to our last video on him, he ignored all our arguments and adopted this strange position that you shouldn't use the word Hebrew to refer to the language, and to just reject the word because that English word, that English reference to the language doesn't appear in the Hebrew text. It's a very strange argument, and that was like the bulk of it. And then a lot of it was insults, the very colorful insults, jetpack raccoon, and all sorts of this. Forgive me, but just very vulgar stuff also. And then the accusation of being effeminate and all this, lots of insults. And then the other thing was this straw man.
A lot of projection going on his end. But I would say this. I seem to see in Judah Natzarah this sort of contrarian spirit. Like it's almost like he has this mindset. When I say that, I mean it in a more, I don't want people to think like I'm literally, no. He has this very contrarian mindset where he basically will, if he can go against the grain, he'll do it just for the sake of going against the grain. He won't actually interact with someone's arguments as they are. He just wants to be different in essence, right? That's what I'm kind of getting from him. I'm gleaning that from the way that he argues. And if he can, it'll be, like you said, an insult ad hom fest where he basically just attacks the person by projecting on them things that are clearly not true and ignoring the relevant points that are actually being raised against his own position. So instead of actually addressing the relevant points, he in essence tosses out a red herring And this is an example of a red herring. I believe that he's not just tossing out a red herring. He is strawmanning what it is that we actually are saying, and in essence, ignoring all the relevant points that undermine his own position.
And attempting to poison the well. I mean, one thing that both myself and Faithful, as I've said, have been arguing against Lashwan Kodash. He doesn't call it Lash. By the way, full disclosure, Judah Natzarah no longer refers to the language as Lashwan Kodash. He seems to have stopped at some point late in 2017. But nonetheless, Faithful and I have been arguing against it. And one of our main arguments against Lashwan Kodash is to appeal to ancient transliterations, mainly in Greek, to a lesser extent in Latin. But you can look at the way ancient people understood Hebrew pronunciation by the transliterations that they left behind in the Greek New Testament, in the Septuagint, and as Faithful and I were discussing today, also in the writings of Josephus. Now, that's a major pillar of our argument. And Faithful knows this. He's seen this in the correspondences we've had. He's seen this in previous videos, but he ignores all that. And he continuously says that we simply just trust whatever some obscure Ashkenazi Jew says. He'll put these pictures of Hasidic rabbis on the screen and say, they just believe whatever this guy says. And then he also he brings up these things like, this phenomenon of metzitza bepe, where certain insular, just vulgar stuff, and I don't even want to, I was about to describe it, but just vulgar stuff that exists in certain Jewish communities. And he'll bring that up and say, these guys just believe whatever they say. But he's ignoring the salient argument, which doesn't rely on any modern Jewish person whatsoever and goes straight to ancient evidence. And on his side, on the other hand, he never presents any ancient evidence. He just sort of presents his alternative pronunciation and almost tacitly demands that you accept it on faith.
Right. So in essence, what he's doing is he's positing his claim, basically giving us his assertion without any evidence for the assertion. And then he's basically telling us to refute it. So that's not the way that it works, though, Judah Natzarah. The burden of proof is on you to provide evidence. It's not simply making an assertion and not providing evidence. And by evidence, we mean primary evidence. We provided primary evidence. We've shown you transliterations of the Septuagint. We showed you, various other things. I believe that Abu brought out the Peshitta and different things of that nature. And you did not interact with any of that. What you did was, in essence, go back to parroting the same argument that you initially brought forth, which we clearly showed was fallacious. And you ignored everything that we presented and attempted to argue something else. You threw out a red herring. Now you're arguing against the Hebrew language. Now, before we go into what we're going to do tonight, I want to show something. So this is from etymology.com. Now, granted, I'm not a fan of, bringing out the etymology words, because I think that can ultimately lead to an etymological fallacy, right? But knowing who we're dealing with, I think it's important that we at least present where the term Hebrew comes from, right, in the English. So if you guys can see my screen, and so we see right here, Hebrew, which is an adjective, late Old English, from Old French, Eberu, from the Latin Hebraeus, from Greek, Hebraios, from Aramaic, Semitic, Ebrai, or am I pronouncing that right? Ebrai, corresponding to the Hebrew Ibri, right? An Israelite, traditionally from an ancestral name, Eber, but probably literally one from the other side, perhaps in reference to the river Euphrates, or perhaps simply signifying immigrant. From Iber, the region, on the other or opposite side. The initial H was restored in English from the 16th century. As a noun from the 1200s, the Hebrew language, late 14th century, in reference to persons originally a biblical Jew, Israelite. So here we see that the etymology of the word derives from its original Shemitic usage. Yet for whatever reason, Judah Natzarah seems to be of the belief that, I guess that the name is not necessarily used in reference to the language in the Hebrew Bible, but we see the language being referred to as Hebrew by the Israelites in antiquity. And although he doesn't accept the New Testament by and large was composed by Israelites, and those Israelites referred to the language as Hebrew. right? Would that be correct, Abu?
In a sense, yeah, I'm sure. I mean, they may have been using most likely they're using an Aramaic word, maybe
Aramaic,
in a
but
certain
needless to say,
Ibre or something like that, or
right,
in or even Ibri in Hebrew, or Ebraisti in Greek or something like that. You know, I don't know.
but ultimately, what's being conveyed by the writers is that whether they were speaking Aramaic or whether they were using the liturgical language, the Hebrew liturgical language, they still were referring to Ebraisti, right? Which still coincides with what today is referred to as Hebrew, right? Which is whether you're speaking the dialect of the land of Canaan in its time, when the Israelites were there, whether it was the dialect that they incorporated when they came out of the Babylonian captivity, it was all referred to as Ebraisti or Ebrais or Hebraios. So what I wanted to show him was that, number one, his argument is built on a fallacious premise. And I think with that, this would be a good time to kind of segue into what we're going to bring out. The truth of the matter is that his understanding of Hebrew really just seems contingent on whatever flavor of the month he's going for that week. So, for example, just kind of going back to his arguments with, for La Shawan Kodash and then against it, right? The usage of that term. Initially, he seemed all right with using it. Then he seemed to go against it whenever, I guess, you guys started really tackling the issue.
Yeah. After we brought it out, you were on the show too. After first we brought it up, we're going to touch on this later. We touched on it in the last video and he ignored it. Right. But we brought that out when both of you and I were on the dividing line. And then I brought it out again on Vocab Malone's show, and it was only after that all of a sudden he had a problem with it. But right up until August. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, one thing before we even go into that, because I just remembered this, I find it intriguing that when you look in the Bible, for example, Abraham, when he was known as Abram, was referred to as a Hebrew, right? Ibri in the Hebrew. And that word, if I'm not mistaken, was transliterated as Hebraios in the Septuagint. So
yes,
the Hebrews understood the term. And I think there's a part of it that goes into their tradition in terms of believing that Eber was ultimately the one who retained, during the dispersal of the languages at Babylon, because we see a lot of this in the external writings of the Israelites, that Eber was the one who retained the Hebrew language. Therefore, from Eber going to Abraham, this language has a kind of like a streamline effect where people have retained the dialect, so to speak, in the region, and they continually use it. So Abraham was referred to as a Hebrew, right? And then we see the Israelites in Exodus being referred to as Hebrews. Again, in the Septuagint, seeing the same term being used there for those people, it boggles the mind. Now, granted, it doesn't outright say, well, the language is being referred to as Hebrew, but I think one can conclude that if the people are being referred to as Hebrews, their language would also be referred to as Hebrew, right? If you're English, you speak English. If you're Spanish, you speak Spanish. Now, granted, I don't want to get caught up into a category error and make it seem like a Spanish person couldn't speak other languages. But what I mean is, generally speaking, if you are Hebrew, your language, your native tongue will more than likely take on the name that you have applied to yourself, right? Or that has been applied to you. In this case, Hebrew. So I don't know where he's getting this idea that Hebrew is not a descriptive term for the dialect, even though we have tons of evidence from antiquity.
Well, he would say that none of those sources literally use the English word Hebrew. That's actually his argument. He's not actually objecting to the Hebrew language. He's objecting to literally just to the English name for the language, which is such a bit of hair splitting. That's why I gave that analogy of like a text written in Espanol and saying, well, it doesn't say Spanish, It's
there's a bit of
a German text. It's just absurd. Yeah,
hold on.
Go ahead.
There's a bit of hypocrisy in that because look at his name.
Yeah.
Why doesn't he call himself Judah Natzarah? Why is he calling himself Judah with the U, by the way? He has this big thing against the U, yet he invokes the English transliteration of the Hebrew name Yehuda, or as they would say in the fraudulent dialect, Yehuda, and yet he has no problem using that, but for whatever reason, he has a big issue with calling the language by its English transliteration. That makes no sense. That's illogical. I don't know.
It's literally hair splitting. That's what it is. It's something he came up with on the fly, so he could have something to pick a fight over, since he wasn't going to respond to our actual arguments. It's a very cheap argument. He himself had no problem with the word Hebrew. He's used it literally for years. For years, I know Hebrew, this and that. You don't know Hebrew, Hebrew this and Hebrew that, and man, now all of a sudden, if you're using the word Hebrew, you're going off. You're getting that from the Ashkenazis. Like what? Right. This is an abrupt switch, and it's also irrelevant. I mean, you could call the language whatever you want. Let's start calling it Hebrew or something like that. But
very quickly, Brother Jay, in the zip folder, can you pull up the image that says Negi, if I'm not mistaken? So Negi would be,
all right.
I guess.
Yes.
He's somebody who actually fellowships with the TORAHites. Now, I'm not sure if he's an actual member, but he's constantly in their hangouts. He's constantly with them. So, all right. So now notice this is Negi right here, and look how he starts off. Now, this was from Abu, the Shield Squad response to Sakari, right? The diss track.
Yeah, precisely. And it was a meta comment. Judah Natzarah had commented on that, and then he responded to Judah's comment on that Vocab Malone video.
Right. So I'll just quickly just show the relevant portion, right? Or I'll read it. It says, Shalom, Judah. Just heard this guy attack the Hebrew language. Okay. Just heard this guy attack the Hebrew language. Ironically enough, in the diss track, Tony Ray from Hazakim makes fun of Lashawan Kodash. Now, why is this individual getting upset, poking fun of Lashawan Kodash, if according to Judah Natzarah, that's not even the name of the language, and moreover, it's not even called Hebrew. So why even call it the Hebrew language?
Mm-hmm.
It's like there's just just an amount of illogic coming from virtually everybody on that end, and it's really just like you said, hair splitting. It's mind-boggling to see this kind of stuff. But
yeah, and notice as you pointed out, this member of the TORAHites apparently didn't get the memo yet on the rejection of the word Hebrew, which is very similar to the situation with Lashawan Kodash, as we're going to show later. And as we showed, very importantly, we spent about 15 minutes on it, almost 20 minutes on it on our last video. Judah Natzarah was using the phrase Lashawan Kodash last year in 2017 in February, and the TORAHites were still using it in August, and all of them were using it after we had pointed out that where it came from, and then all of a sudden they're declaring that it comes from Esau, it comes from the Edomites, and all of a sudden they have a problem with it, Right. But so it's the same thing with this. You see their team using the word.
No, well, I would just say the contrarian nature of Judah Natzarah ultimately forces them to change up their positions, even though, like you said, a week earlier they were all agreeing that this is what it's called, right? So it's ironic.
I have actually another comment I want to make, because actually, could you put the image back up? I just want to point out something. The last two words, that little thing from Negi, if we could put that back up. Yeah, here we go. So the last two words, this is their pronunciation of the last two words in Deuteronomy 6:4. They pronounce it Yahweh Akkad, right? And this is really when the whole thing kicked off between Judah Natzarah and Vocab Malone. It had to do with the fact that they were trying to get him to affirm that phrase. Interestingly enough, Judah Natzarah, one big dispute, because really, as I said before, the dispute between proponents of Lashawan Kodash, whether it's the One West version or Judah Natzarah's slight innovation, one of the major disputes is the question of whether or not Hebrew characters can be vocalized in multiple ways, in a variety of different ways. So, for example, the standard position in Semitic languages, if you take like the second character, it's called the beit in Hebrew and the ba in Arabic, the standard view in Semitic languages, whether it's Arabic, Hebrew, Aramaic, is that you can vocalize that character in multiple ways. It can be bi, bu, ba, And so, but the proponents of Lashawan Kodash take the position that Hebrew characters can only be pronounced one way. They can only be vocalized one way. Now, the reason why I bring that up is because of this word akkad, right, that they insist on for ehad. Judah Natzarah has elsewhere said that the Aleph, which is the first character in the word Echad or Achad, as they say, he insists that in other cases it's pronounced like for the Hebrew version of Jehu, he says that it's pronounced Yahweh. So my question is, and this is an important question. I asked Judah Natzarah this in our correspondence, and he didn't address it, but hopefully he'll see this and maybe he'll address it. The question for Judah Natzarah is, does he now acknowledge that certain Hebrew characters can be vocalized in different ways, at least the Aleph? Can the first Hebrew character in his mind alternatively be pronounced A and as in Akkad, or like he says that in Leah, it is pronounced almost like an E in pen or something like that. Interesting question, because I think he's slowly moving towards accepting the truth of the matter, which is that Hebrew characters can be vocalized in multiple ways. And, if he ever does accept that, it'll snowball into acceptance of, a proper understanding of Hebrew and Arabic and Aramaic. But I think he's starting to inch towards that with the Aleph. So I don't know if he's going to watch this video, but I'd love to get his thoughts on that. The Aleph, the first Hebrew character. Can it be vocalized two different ways, and or does it only have one sound? It's an interesting question.
Right. So very quickly, let's actually look at something to kind of look at some of the things that he tried to address in his video. Again, for those who don't know, the video was basically one long ad hom fest. I want to say like the vast majority of the video was just ad homs and just attacking a straw man and red herrings left and right. But he made certain points. You could actually pull up the first clip. Abu, after we play this, definitely want to get your thoughts.
That's a curse. When your mind is unproductive, you can't even think straight. That's the curse. And Effeminate Mike, from all of them, G-Con, G-Man, all of them, they're all cursed in their brains. Their minds are unproductive. They don't have knowledge, wisdom, and understanding.
All right. I'm so glad we included that.
Well, I want to highlight something if we could. The video was so filled with just even this, just listening to it now, I'm thinking to myself, there's really not much there to work with, right? I mean, it's like, how do you respond to this? It's just, so basically we're under curses, so-called, because we don't share Judah Natzarah's faulty interpretation of Hebrew, in essence. Abu, just watching this, though, glean from just the... I mean, what
I got a lot to say on this.
Yeah, go right ahead, man. I mean,
well, first off, if people notice that Ashkenazi rabbi throwing up the the mano cornuta or something like that, the horned hand, he put up pictures like that constantly, and that was like his constant argument. Effeminate, faithful to God, and then his other crew and all that. They just follow these people. They just follow, and he'd make all these vulgar references to what they do and all that. But the thing is, so that's a straw man, first of all. But more importantly, I'm glad we included this, because I'm not trying to be abusive. But there really is a tremendous irony here. When he says that, that your mind is unproductive and you can't think straight, I encourage anyone who's interested to take a look at the correspondence we had with Judah Natzarah. I'm happy to link to it in the comment section later on. And for those people who don't have access to Vocab's forum where it took place, I can also send you a PDF of the correspondence if you're interested. The correspondence really served as an example of the adage that I said before, which is that clear writing requires clear thinking. His inability to stay focused on the subject, to mount some sort of a coherent argument, to respond to the arguments that were being put forth. I mean, all of that was lacking. He couldn't do any of that. And I think that showed how, and again, I'm not trying to be abusive, this is going to sound abusive, but it showed how foggy his mindset is, how foggy his comprehension of the subject is. And that's what makes that video so ironic. He's accusing us of not being able to think straight, but really that's honestly the case when it comes to him and his understanding of Semitic languages. And that's what makes that little clip so So ironic. But you said there's not much to work with. That honestly was the whole video. The whole video gave us almost nothing to work with. And and he didn't respond to any of our arguments, nothing. But whatever. We'll show maybe one or two other clips over the course of this, and then we'll get to the salient point of, our discussion. But
yeah, so, what I kind of want to really tackle is the fact that this is the line of argumentation that he tends to employ. It's like, I almost get a feeling, and again, I personally don't mean this as a, any sort of offensive statement, but it's just what one gleans from dealing with this guy. He seems to be very much anti-intellectual. By anti-intellectual, we're not like propping up intellectualism as some sort of divine thing, like, whatever. No, but just in terms of dealing with arguments, right, in a coherent manner, in a logical manner. It seems like he doesn't know how to interact with other individuals outside of just ad homs, and maybe some of that has to do with his dealings with Hebrew Israelism proponents, whether it be New Testament or non-New Testament. Maybe he's just used to talking to people in that manner, that when he actually deals with individuals who are well versed in the topic that he purports to be learned in, that's the only sort of like reaction. It's almost like second nature for him. And I would hope that if he does make a rebuttal to this video, that he would at the very least go back and watch the first video and actually interact with the arguments that were made against his position, and that he would show whatever it is that he's assuming that we're getting wrong, that he would actually go out on the limb to highlight those things, information that contradicts whatever we were showing. And then at that point, we can actually get to the heart of the matter, which I'm going to be honest with everybody out there. He's not going to be able to do it because his position has no legs to stand on. It does not have any legs to stand on. That dialect was created by Ariyah. All right. And lest he try to make the appeal to the Paleo script, I don't think he realizes that a script does not give you the pronunciations of a language. In other words, if you look at the Arabic script, Swahili incorporates the Arabic script. Now, Swahili is a completely different dialect than Arabic, yet both these languages employ the same script. A script will not give you the pronunciation of a language. It's simply a script. It's used to write. Now, you can adopt a script. For example, the Greeks adopted the Phoenician script. The Phoenician language and the Greek language are two completely different languages, yet the Greek language incorporated the Phoenician script into their alphabet. That's how their first alphabet came about. I don't know where he's getting it. Again, we could even use the there's a bunch of examples, but I feel like I'm going to get sidetracked on that one. But needless to say, Abu, I think that he, again, is way over his head with this topic. And it's like he's too uninformed to really be engaging with some, how do you, I really don't know what else to say, but I'll just say this. It's just troubling to see somebody who has almost this anti-intellectualism to them, where, again, they cannot deal with an argument unless they're insulting the person, unless they're doing, outlandish things, which only serves to highlight his ignorance. It doesn't do anything to us, because the things that he's saying about us are false. But the things that we're saying about him and the arguments that we're presenting against his position are very much true. So it is what it is. So let's actually look at, let's see. Abu, if you'd like, I don't know if you'd like to actually show the correspondence, or would you rather that we go into, the next clip? I'll leave it up to you. What do you prefer? Abu.
Yeah, sorry about that. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, let's we'll show a little excerpt from the correspondence later, and maybe if people in the comment section say they want to see more, we can do that. But it's hard to show the correspondence on the screen, so because it's so long. But for anyone who's interested, let us know. We'll send it to you, or we'll give you the links, etc. If you have access to Vocab's Facebook forum.
Well, how about this? Can we show a small portion? We don't have to go through the whole thing, but just maybe a small example of maybe
I
a relevant
emailed
point
you
that
the
you
links.
made.
You got the links if you want to pull it up.
Yeah. So, Jay, if you could you actually pull up the correspondence? So,
Is it titled correspondence?
oh, that's right. Well, actually, you know what? I'll actually send it to you on Facebook. But how about we do this in the meantime?
All right.
Let's go ahead and play the second clip.
All
Right. So the second clip would be the LQ rabbinic. Go ahead and we'll show the correspondence a little later.
See here, the language is never called Hebrew or Lashon Kodash, which there's nothing wrong with that, Lashon Kodash, but it's actually a term that's made up by their bosses. They call it Loishin Kodesh, which is a fact. And vocab alone saw this, and he didn't address it at all. No, he acted like he didn't see it and went back and attacked Israelites and acted like we coined that phrase when we don't even say that phrase. That's a phrase that these people say, Loishin Kodesh. Now, let's get to something.
All right, there we go.
Yeah, actually, yeah. It's so sad because for him to say that, it shows that either he ignored what we covered from like the 16th minute to we spent like 20 minutes on it, on the subject of that phrase, Lashon Kodash and Loshin Kodesh and Lashon Kodesh. He's pretending that somehow he taught that to vocab, just like he's pretending that he taught that to you, in his last video on this subject, which is just preposterous, I guess we should jump to the well, actually, we could show the tweets. We could show whatever you think is best.
Well, how about this? Let's actually show the tweets where, for instance, you very much were dealing with this topic well before it maybe even crossed his mind.
Mm-hmm.
So,
the tweets are the earliest. Yeah.
So if you could go ahead and show those tweets, Jay.
This is just one. It's Let's see.
I mean, it's utterly amazing that this is the sort of line of reasoning that he tends to employ. Yeah, there we go. All right. So I'll go ahead and read it for the audience. It says,
and by the way, this is from April of 2015. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yep, April of 2015. A follow-up to my 4-tweet series on UPKer, Lashon Kodash, and Ashkenazi Loishin Kodesh from earlier today. So basically, anybody who wants to check this out, again, we can provide this for the listening audience if they'd like to see it. We can put in the description, or can we perhaps even leave it in the live chat.
I'm sorry, can we scroll up just to see the 4 tweets that came before it? Because the 4 tweets are right above it. So if you go through those, that sets up that tweet.
Okay, there we go. So it says some ultra-Orthodox Ashkenazis prefer their own dialect of Hebrew with its heavily Yiddish pronunciations to modern Israeli Hebrew. By the way, let's just highlight something. They prefer their Yiddish pronunciations over Hebrew. For those who are advocates of the Lashon Kodash dialect, one of the points that they like to make incorrectly is to refer to modern Israeli Hebrew as Yiddish, not realizing that modern Israeli Hebrew and Yiddish are actually 2 completely different languages, right? Objecting to MIH, they refer to their preferred dialect as Loishin Kodesh, Holy Tongue. Sound familiar? Sound like anyone we know? This got me thinking, being that Loishin Kodesh or Lashon Kodesh does not appear in the Hebrew Bible, from where did UPKers, and by UPKers you mean One Westers, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Where did UPKers get that precise term? Arya, the creator of Lashon Kodash, had roots in groups closer to Ashkenazi Judaism. So perhaps he took the idea from there. And then this is where you go into the one that we looked at earlier. So you were already dealing with this topic before it even crossed Judah Natzarah's mind. And yet somehow, some way, he taught you and me and everybody else this. For the record, I also became familiar of this topic in part because Abu brought it to my attention. And this was again in 2015. Isn't that ironic that the whole reason that we knew about this was because, one, it was brought to our attention not by Judah Natzarah, And once we looked into it and we realized, oh wow, yeah, there's some striking parallels there. You know, later on when we appeared on the dividing line, a lot of this was mentioned, right? For example, I made mention of Yiddish and Hebrew, modern Israeli Hebrew, being two distinct dialects, which you had already tackled way before I did, right? You actually had a 4-part video series on the Truth After Knowledge channel with the original group that you were with, Truth After Knowledge. So anybody wants to check that out, they can type in TAK Classics, and it's the Lashawan Kodash videos. And again, something that's unfamiliar to us, but for whatever reason, he seems to be this, so-called inspiration, where everybody's being inspired by him, but meanwhile, all these topics seem lost on him. And I wouldn't be surprised if we looked on his channel and find 0 videos on this topic prior to him finding out about it in
late 2017. It's obvious to me that they found out in late 2017, and we're going to touch on the evidence. We touched on it last time in our previous video on Judah Natzarah's poor understanding of Hebrew. We covered it from about the 16-minute 40-second mark, so about 16:40 to 35:10. So that's almost 20 minutes we devoted to this subject, where we show that we knew about it before him, that he was still using it long after we brought it out. But go ahead.
I mean, at this point, I think it's very clear that, again, the topic was not unfamiliar to us, but it was definitely, I would assume, unfamiliar to Judah Natzarah during that time, because I don't recall him touching this topic until, well, when you actually showed that video in the last hangout, right? I think that was his first open declaration of and by the way, if we could give me 1 second, if we could actually do something as well. Jay, could you go ahead and just to be on record, because again, I want those people who do hold to the One West position, who are not members of Torah Knights or anything like that, who continually make this fallacious argument against the Hebrew dialect, the modern Israeli Hebrew dialect, and say that it's actually Yiddish. Could you do me a favor? In the zip folder, there are some images that say Yiddish and then Lashawan Kodash, Hebrew. Could you actually show those images?
And by the way, I also got something that I want to pull up on that I sent Jay, which will be relevant to what we were talking about the difference between script and language. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So if you look up here, up top, now, again, I actually grabbed these from the Lashawan Kodash video on the TAK Classics channel. Now, notice it says Standard Ancient Hebrew Vowel Point Script, Genesis 11:5. And at the bottom, you see where it says Yiddish, Genesis 11:5. Now, in the previous hangout, we actually looked at this. But again, we're just going over it again for those who are going to be watching this video for the first time and are unfamiliar with this topic. So the first part, as we see, is written in the same Asuri script, right, as the bottom. Yet both of these two examples are, the spelling of words is completely different, as anybody can see. The length of the verse is different, and even the way that God's name is rendered. Now, Jay, if you could actually show the second one. So this is the first one. So that one. So we can see the transliteration of what we just read. Remember, I mentioned earlier that a script is not indicative of a dialect, right? Now look what it says. Here's the transliteration of what you just saw from Genesis 11:5. In the Hebrew, it says, not to be there. I would.
Yeah, that was what's his name? Zakaria put that up. Okay.
Right. But I would say, Vayered Yahweh lirot et ha'ir ve'et hamagidal asher banu beni ha'adam. Right. Now in Yiddish, it says hat gat amperngindert sutzen do stot undem turem vos dem hoben. I can't see the rest of it.
Menschkinder, literally children of men.
Yeah, Menschkinder hoben gebuit. There we go. So clearly,
that's how they rendered Bnei Adam. Bnei Adam is Menschkinder.
Right. Isn't it interesting though that here you have at the bottom Yiddish, and at the top you have modern Israeli Hebrew, which is being derived, if I'm not mistaken, I'm taking it that he used the Lending Guard
Masoretic
Codex.
text. Yeah, he went by the Masoretic text,
Right.
and the pointing in the Masoretic text, and he put a slightly, in terms of the was, he put a slightly modern Israeli spin on it. But.
Right. So it's ironic that he's making an argument against modern Israeli Hebrew by asserting that I would say not him, but Lashawan, let me actually correct myself. Lashawan Kodash proponents tend to go out on the limb to say that modern Israeli Hebrew is Yiddish, yet at the top we have modern Israeli Hebrew, at the bottom we have Yiddish, and they're two completely distinct dialects, right? Whatsoever between the two of them. Now, Brother Jay, could you pull up the third image just so we can look at the name of God, so we can see how God would be pronounced in Yiddish, or how it would be spelled in Yiddish, and how it's spelled in Hebrew, right? It says one of the most obvious differences in the text is the name of the Lord, right? In the Masoretic Hebrew uses YHWH, whereas Yiddish uses God. Let's look again. And then that would be the next image after that one. And it actually shows the difference between even the spelling, which I think should be, yeah, there you go. So that right there destroys the modern Israeli Hebrew is actually Yiddish argument. That just goes out the window. And so with that being said, I know you wanted to bring out some things, Abu.
Yeah,
So,
if Jay could put it up, I got something just to touch on the difference between script and language. And by the way, I just want to tell everybody we're going to Faithful. This is a minor. This Google Hangout is touching on everything in a very peripheral sense. Faithful and I have been planning on doing a series of videos on Lashawan Kodash. We're hoping to get it out in the next, I don't know, a couple of weeks or something like that, where we're going to do a number of different small segments. So we'll do one on language, the difference between language and script, which proponents don't understand. We'll do another one on the ancient evidence against Lashawan Kodash. We'll do, I'm sorry, no, not that one. I just sent you another one on Facebook. But anyway, as I was saying, so we have a number of things that we're going to focus on. Hopefully that series will be out soon. We're just covering stuff in a very peripheral sense this way, but we're just waiting for this image to pop up. Let's see.
Yeah, Jay, could you pull it back?
He's got it. Yep, that's it. All right. So hold on 1 second. I don't. Let's see. Is it? You see it on?
Yeah,
the screen?
I see it on my end. Yep.
Okay, good. Although I don't see it on the live feed. That's the only thing. Maybe I got to spin this up. Let me see. Oh yeah, I definitely.
Yeah,
see
it's actually showing up.
Excellent. All right, my apologies. So I just wanted to make this point. So we have on the top half, you have the 5 lines in the Ashuri script, right? And then now we'll probably pull the same graphic up in our series on Lashawan Kodash. So we'll get into more detail. I'm not going to go into detail now. And then on the bottom 5 lines are 5 lines in the Phoenician script, or the Paleo Hebrew script. Now this is the thing. If you the thing is, a lot of people who understand Hebrew today, they're not familiar with the Phoenician script, but people who are familiar with Hebrew and Arabic and Ladino and Yiddish and stuff like that, and Aramaic, if you taught them the Phoenician script, they would instantly realize that those 5 lines are 5 different languages. So what you see in the Phoenician script, the so-called Paleo Hebrew script, the top line is Biblical Hebrew. The second line is Jewish Aramaic. Right? The third line is Arabic. It's Arabic. If a person understood Arabic and then understood the Phoenician script, they'd be able to make sense of this.
Could I actually stop you right there for a moment?
Mm-hmm.
So, Brother Jay, could you do something? Can you just move over with your cursor right there? Can you actually, just kind of like with your cursor go over so the audience can see the first line? No, at the bottom, on the Paleo script, right? Up top.
Yeah, there you go. That's top.
Right, just so people can see that there's that you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, granted, all of these are different languages.
That's Hebrew. That's Biblical Hebrew. That's that's the opening line of the Torah, right? It's Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, right? The next line is Aramaic. This is Jewish Aramaic. Bekadmin bara, ya shamaya wa yat Allah, right? And then the next one is Arabic. Now, on this line that he's highlighting here, I want to point out the fourth word. The fourth word is the word Allah. It's the word Allah. It's how it's spelled in Arabic. And the fifth word, it opens up with an alif lam because that's the definite article in Arabic. And it's funny because Hebrew, Arabic, and Aramaic have different definite articles, and that would be like the first clue that would give this away. Which one's Arabic, which one's Hebrew, etc. Now let's go to the.
Wait.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But before we do, I want to highlight this because this might be going over the heads of certain members of that group and those who hold to this language. What Abu did with this was to highlight that you can literally use a script, the Paleo script in this instance, which they love to make appeals to, literally write in virtually any language in that script, right? Any Semitic language in that particular script, correct?
Exactly. Well, let's put it like this. The languages that are being produced here are all languages that have been written in the Hebrew script already. So Hebrew has been written in the Hebrew script. Aramaic, Jewish Aramaic has been written in the Hebrew script. You can see that in the Targums and stuff like that. Arabic, there's such a thing as Judeo-Arabic, which has been written in the Hebrew script. Saadia Gaon did that. There's a number of Jewish thinkers from the Arab world, from the Middle Ages, who they wrote in Arabic. Maimonides, of all people, did this. He would write in Arabic using the Hebrew script. So too, Yiddish is written in the Hebrew script, and Ladino is. Now, here's the thing: anything that you can write in the script at top, which is called the Ashuri script, the Assyrian script, or the standard square script, some people say, you can write it in the Phoenician script because there's a one-to-one correspondence between the characters of the Ashuri script and the characters of the Phoenician script, or the so-called Paleo Hebrew script.
Right.
So anything you can write in one, you can write in the other. So all these languages have these languages have been written in the Hebrew script. So by the way, the next line, this is going to be interesting. Faithful, you might catch this. So the opening word, I don't know if you can make it out. By the way, it's the same. The text up top is the exact same thing as the text at the bottom. The opening two words are in principio.
Oh man! Now this would be Ladino, correct?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. You knew it right away, right?
Right. Yeah.
So in principio, crio el Dio. And now here the definite articles are a little different. Rather than los for cielos, and it's elos. So elos cielo y la tierra, right? But
right,
I mean, if you understand Spanish, you understand most of that. Just the definite articles are a little weird, but that's Ladino. So you have Spanish written in the Hebrew script or the Phoenician script, and then the bottom line is Yiddish. And again, we're just touching on this lightly. Faithful and I are going to do a series on the difference between script and language, and we'll get into this in a lot more detail, God willing, soon.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, this is hilarious because here you have all these different dialects and even language. I mean, the case of Yiddish, completely different language, and even Ladino, right? And yet they're all incorporating the same script. So according to proponents of Lashon Kodash, this should all be the same, right? Because it's the same script. Look, the top one is the same, the bottom one is the same. I guarantee you, if we show this to incognizant members of some of the camps that promote that specific dialect, I'm almost tempted to say if we don't point out that these are all different languages, they'll just assume the same, basically.
Yeah, it's a bluff. What'll happen is that I see now a lot. There's certain people where you'll discuss a verse with them, and when they get stuck, they'll say, "Oh, we'll break it down in the Paleo Hebrew," which is a script. They're referring to a script. And I mean, I've shown this to people in Vocab's forum. I remember once I hit a guy with a thing. I wrote it out in the Phoenician script, a Yiddish phrase that means, I like to listen to klezmer music and eat knishes. You can write that in the Phoenician script, and these guys wouldn't know. I mean, most of them would have no idea what they're looking at.
Right. Yeah, man. I mean, it's amazing to see the level of ignorance, and I hate to say it that way, but it is a level of ignorance that is exhibited by these individuals, because in essence, many of them are simply parroting what their camp leaders taught them. Now, in the case of Judah Natzarah, he was never a member of a camp, as far as I know. However, he was clearly influenced by the camps. I mean, the fact that he's even using their dialect. the fact that he incorporates many of their doctrines. So, for example, the white man being Esau, you know, even the breakdowns concerning, you know, the Israelites and the curses and so on and so forth. It's, you know, in the same vein as the One Westers. So clearly this man was influenced by One West in some capacity, right? Or a camp, individuals from camps, but clearly influenced by them. And yet he continually tries to downplay that. And he goes into this whole, you know, I was never a part of a camp, as if we're asserting that he was, and that's not what we're saying. But yet the influence is there. And he also, unfortunately, incorporates their ignorance into his own line of argumentation. He has a very contrarian nature and he wants to go against the grain. He ultimately will, I think if he can try to win an argument, he'll undermine his own position just for the sake of trying to win, if that makes any sense, right? He'll actually go out on a limb to contradict himself just so that he's not caught up in, you know, basically pinned to the wall in his arguments. And I find that to be disingenuous, but, you know, it is what it is. But so now that we've looked at that, you know, very quickly, Abu, I was wondering if, give me 1 second. So is that, I'm trying to figure out, would that, let's see.
Yeah, that sums it up. We can get back to the history of, because where we were before we went on the segue is we were talking about, we had showed the tweet showing that we knew about the connection between Lashon Kodash and Loshen Kodesh and Lashon Kodesh. But I wanted to show, we have a thing, image, history LQ phrase where we can talk about this, you know, who knew it first. Obviously we knew it first, but the history is interesting and we covered it in the last one. Yeah, precisely this, if I may. Is it okay if I comment on this?
Yeah, go right ahead, man.
So we already showed the tweet. Just to give a little bit of background, Judah Natzarah no longer refers to his version of the language as Lashon Kodash, but him and the TORAHites used to do so. They used to do so. And that phrase came from One West. That was Ariah's phrase for it. But Ariah and maybe, you know, Lashon Kodash may have actually originated with Abba Bivens. Whatever the case, the phrase, both Abba Bivens and Ariah, came out of a quasi-rabbinic environment. And the phrase Lashon Kodash or Lashon Kodesh, however you want to pronounce it, is found nowhere in the Hebrew Bible. It's nowhere in the text of the Tanakh. And so it begs the question, well, where did they get that phrase from? It turns out it's a phrase that comes from rabbinic literature. And as we had pointed out earlier, certain insular Ashkenazi communities invoked it against modern Israeli Hebrew. So using that phrase against modern Israeli Hebrew, however you want to pronounce it, was a rabbinic thing. It was their word for Hebrew. And, you know, Ariah and them, they adopted it, Lashon Kodash. Now, Judah Natzarah in December was attempting to teach faithful to God about this, you know, that all of a sudden he discovered that Lashon Kodash is a phrase that comes from rabbinic literature, and in Yiddish it's pronounced Loshen Kodesh and all this. But here's the actual history. Now, we discussed this in our last video from about the 16-minute mark onwards, 16 minutes, 40 seconds. But I want to go over it real quick. We don't have to show the clips, but I wanted to show what the videos are so that way if other people want to look it up, they can see it. So first, this is the tweets that we showed aside. As far as discussing Lashon Kodash versus Loshen Kodesh, as far as discussing that online, on YouTube, here's the history of it. In July of 2016, both Faithful and I appeared on an episode of The Dividing Line. You can find the video online. It's titled Judaism's Influence on the Hebrew Israelites. It's on the Alpha and Omega Ministries account. Again, this is July of 2016. If you go to the 28-minute, 38-second mark, you'll hear us beginning to discuss, myself and Vocab, discuss this connection between the phrase Lashon Kodash and Lashon Kodesh, that it's a rabbinic phrase. Okay? Jump ahead to the 11th of February, 2017, nearly a year later. Judah Natzarah had a video titled Lashon Kodash, the Abaray language versus Yiddish and English Israelites. And he would even have on the screen, as you can see there, he would have Lashon Kodash being emblazoned. He was still using the phrase as recently as February of 2017. Jump ahead to, now this is the third video, on the IRA Israel account. This is a member of the TORAHites, and this was after Vocab Malone had appeared on the TORAHites hangout where this first kicked off. He made a video on the 25th of August titled "Vocab Malone Gets Destroyed Again." And at the 8 minute and 40-second mark, you can hear him still referring to it as Lashon Kodash. So as I mentioned with the previous video, as recent as February, Judah was still using the phrase Lashon Kodash, and as recently as August 25th, this member of the Torah Knights, Israel, I don't know what he calls himself aside from a screen name, was also using the phrase Lashon Kodash. He even said, I'm going to teach vocab Malone the Lashon Kodash or something to that effect. Then that same day, later that night, Vocab and we did a video titled "The Lashon Kodash Takedown: Hebrew Israelite Fake Language." And if you go to the 1 hour, 16 minute, and 45-second mark, you can see us discuss the same thing we discussed back in July 2016. Only we do it with more graphics. We bring out the scan of a certain book on the subject, which also appeared in the tweet, and and we also show where Lashon Kodesh appears in certain rabbinic literature, like for example the commentary of Nachmanides, and so on and so on. So, but the point is that Judah Natzarah pretends to teach us, about this subject, yet it's clear that we were using it way before he even knew anything about it, And that's the point here. And the funny thing is, we discussed this in our last video. We devoted 20 minutes to it. We laid it all out. We laid out the history of the videos. He ignored all that. In his most recent video, he's pretending like he's going to teach Vocab Malone about this. It's bizarre. I mean, I apologize if my language is sharp, but it is very, very strange.
Right. To be perfectly honest, I'm really just curious to know why there seems to be this almost like this insistence on, again, I think I mentioned this in the first hangout that we did. A lot of proponents from that end, they're promoting the so-called Hebrew dialect or so-called ancient Hebrew dialect or not. There seems to be this general view that if you acknowledge that you're wrong on one thing, you have to give everything else up, right? I really don't understand where that sort of mindset comes from, because if you're claiming to be about truth and you're promoting something that is not true and it's being shown to you that it's not true, why not go with the evidence? Why not go with facts and deal with the information provided? Weigh it out, do your own research, and see if you come to the same conclusion. And if you find yourself fighting against, then it really just exposes the mere fact that you're not about truth. If you were about truth, you wouldn't be trying your best to be contrarian in your nature just for the mere fact of going against the grain. Just to disagree, just to, because I find that to be, roundabout one of the major issues within the movement as a whole. I mean, I say this as someone who has tried to be objective in terms of, not pigeonholing and placing people into the same box. I definitely know that different Hebrew Israelites believe different things, but that is one thing that I've found at the very least to be a consistent aspect of the movement, the arguing against evidence, right? They're hyper skeptical about any sort of evidence that contradicts their position. But on the other hand, they are unwilling to examine their own viewpoints in light of evidence. And in the case of Lashon Kodash proponents, the case is that whenever you present to them any sort of evidence that contradicts what they've been taught, especially if it's someone who's been holding on to the doctrine for years and years and years, emotionalism that's attaching them to the doctrine that causes them to not let go of what they're holding to in light of extant and reliable evidence. But it is what it is. And so do we have anything else to bring out, Abu? You have to unmute. You're muted again.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I wanted to get to the subject of his misrepresentation, as it says in our little layout. I wanted to touch on. We mentioned it before in his video. He just repeatedly said that we one of his main misrepresentations is that we just trust whatever modern Israelis or, Ashkenazis say, and that's it, which is totally untrue. The truth of the matter is we appealed to ancient evidence, which he ignored. But another thing that he ignored us on, it's relevant to this, or it's within the scope of that accusation, is we've never claimed, let me explain the nuance of our argument for those who don't know. The nuances of our argument is this. We do believe that a great many of the pronunciations in both the Masoretic text and modern Israeli Hebrew are backed up by ancient evidence. But we've never taken the position that everything in modern Israeli Hebrew and everything in the Masoretic text is backed up by the ancient evidence. The ancient evidence works against Lashon Kodash, and it mostly agrees with the Masoretic text, but there are places where they diverge. And this will probably also come up in our series. We'll probably do a small segment on places where the ancient evidence might diverge from modern Israeli Hebrew. But the thing is, it's not like, Judah Natzarah doesn't know this, because this came up in our correspondence. And, I was wondering if we could show an excerpt from the correspondence in that regard. I'll see if we can get it up.
All right.
We'll have this in a second, but this is just something from our correspondence that it's a small segment of one of my responses to Judah Natzarah. And again, anyone who wants to see the larger correspondence, let us know. All right, thank you very much. So Judah Natzarah he had written a lot of different things, and one of the things he had written, he said, Arabic has already been polluted with Greek and Roman influence, as well as additional letters that don't belong in the script. Right, that's the top. That's what he wrote. I'm quoting him as part of a longer series of responses to him, and this is what I wrote to him. So this is from December of last year, so this is well before his latest video. I wrote back to him. I said, we can discuss this in more detail if you'd like, while I await any further elaboration from you, because keep in mind, he just puts the claim out there. I said, while I await any further elaboration from you, for now I will comment on the quote additional letters, end quote. Arabic has long had these phonemes and later came to distinguish them. For example, the ayin had a corresponding ghayan phoneme, hence the eventual distinguishing of the two with a distinct character via a dot. And then I show the character. This phenomenon is quite ancient. This is the significant part. This phenomenon is quite ancient, as ancient Hebrew apparently once had a ghayan phoneme, as can be seen in instances where ancient Greek transliterations rendered an ayin with a gamma, or gamma as we say in English, such as in the case with Gaza, which is spelled with a ghayan in Arabic. Now, we'll get into more detail when we do our series. The point is that obviously we don't just trust anything that modern Ashkenazis say if we have been taking positions that run contrary to their own, And so he misrepresents us, and he doesn't do it unknowingly. He's literally seen the nuances of our position in the correspondences that we've had with him. I have one more thing I want to pull up, just as a quick example. So I have an example of this. It sort of popped up earlier, and maybe it'll pop up now, to show what I was referring to with the ghayan. And we're just going to devote a tiny bit of time to this, and then, like I said, we'll move on to other things. And when we do our series on Lashon Kodash, yes, perfect, thank you. When we do our series on Lashon Kodash, we'll get into this in more detail. So Judah Natzarah takes the position that Arabic happens to have, if you look at the Arabic script, there's a number of characters that line up perfectly with the characters in the Hebrew script or the Aramaic script and so on, or the Syriac or Jewish Aramaic script, whatever you want to say, and the Phoenician script. But Arabic has more characters than Hebrew. And that's because it has more phonemes. So Judah Natzarah's position is, aside from his accusations against Hebrew, he also has accusations against Arabic. And so he says that, the Arabs just added new characters, new letters, new sounds, whatever. And it's sort of something that I don't think he's given much thought to. Like, I wonder if he believes that just one day some Arab said, all right, I'm going to force all the other Arabs to adopt this new sound via this new character. The reality is that these sounds already existed, and they began to distinguish them with slight diacritics. So, for example, what you have on the screen at the top is the character that corresponds to the Hebrew ayin. In Arabic, it's also called ayin. So in this one character could represent two phonemes in Arabic, right? The ayin and the ghayin. So what happened was Arabic in around the 7th century, roughly 7th century, 6th century, began to distinguish the two phonemes with essentially the same character, but one of them had a dot over it. This was adopted, like I said, around the 6th century, maybe the 7th century, right? Now, Judah Natzarah thinks that when that happened, they're just throwing in a new sound into the language, when really the sound has existed in Semitic languages since antiquity, many centuries before. And so what the two phonemes that it breaks into are the two characters, right? The ayin, you'll see on the right, the column on the right, it gives us the word Arabi, right? Which is Arab. And you can see that word come up in, like, for example, I think Nehemiah 2:19 or something like that. I got to look it up. But the Arabi for Arab comes up in the Hebrew script, and I produced the Arabic writing for Arabi and the Hebrew way to write Arabi, right? Arab. And then underneath that, I show how the Septuagint transliterates it, Arabi. So we know how it's pronounced, or how ancient people familiar with Hebrew thought it was pronounced, and it's exactly the way the Arabic is pronounced. Now, here's the interesting thing. The column on the left, you have the ghayin, which is used in the word Gaza, right? Gaza, which is the place currently in Palestine, Gaza. When you look that up in the Hebrew Bible, it gets referred to in the Old Testament, right? You can find Gaza, but when you look it up in the Hebrew script, it's spelled with an ayin. And here's the interesting thing. When you look at how it's transliterated in the Septuagint, it's transliterated Gaza. It's transliterated with a gamma. For some reason, the ancient writers took this Hebrew word, which started with an ayin, and were under the impression that it was pronounced, that first character was pronounced in a way similar to the essentially like the Arabic ghayin before, without even knowing Arabic. They probably didn't know Arabic. This is just a small taste. The point is that, Judah Natzarah tried to attack Arabic without understanding it. But also, this also shows, which is going to come up, that because we affirm this interesting point, that ancient Hebrew probably had a ghayin phoneme, just as Arabic currently has, shows that we don't just side with whatever Ashkenazis say, because there's no, there's no chassid, like there's no Lubavitcher or something like that out there claiming that Hebrew has a ghayin or something like that. That's the only reason I went on this segue, because it's just it's complete nonsense that Judah Natzarah says that we just side with them, when we've shown him this material. Actually, Jay, there's one other thing I wanted to show. It's a very similar graphic. It's titled Ha. It was in the skeleton. The graphic was very similar to that. Yeah, here we go. I'm not going to get into this, but I won't get into this in great detail. But the point is, there's another character, the Ha in Arabic, which with a dot becomes the Ha, and it's because it corresponds to the Het or Het in Hebrew, the 8th character of the Hebrew alphabet. But the thing is, there were two phonemes that existed in Arabic, and we see that reflected again in the Hebrew text. Like, for example, the way Ach is spelled in Arabic, it represents the Ha phoneme, and interestingly enough, that would get in the Septuagint would sort of recognize that. Like, for example, in the name Achimelech, which means my brother is the king, it would the Het would get transliterated with a key, or some people say, I guess in English people say Kai for the Greek character, but a chi, same word in Christos, right? But yet for a word like donkey, like hemor, it would treat it as silent. The Septuagint, when it's a soft sound for the Het, it treats it as silent. Like, for example, in Isaac's name, you have Yitzhak. It treats and it's interesting that the Septuagint is treating the Het as, in some cases, a hard sound like Ha, and in some cases almost a silent sound like Ha, in almost the precise places where Arabic does. It's an interesting point. Now, the only reason I'm showing this graphic is because this is a graphic that I showed to Judah Natzarah. I presented it to him in our correspondence. He completely passed over it in silence. But the point is, he knows that we're not just siding with whatever some modern Ashkenazi insular, these Hasidic rabbis that he puts up. It's so absurd, and he knows it. So he's not just misrepresenting us out of ignorance, I'm sorry, but at this point, it being that we've shown him this stuff, it seems like he's deliberately misrepresenting us because he can't deal with the complexities and the nuances of our argument. So he just tries to tell his followers, oh, they believe whatever the Ashkenazi say. That's it, you know? And that's the only reason I went on this segue, because yes, it is our position that the ancient evidence supports most of the pronunciations in the Masoretic text, supports most of the pronunciations in modern Israeli Hebrew, and supports the ancient evidence supports the notion in both the Masoretic text and modern Israeli Hebrew and Arabic that these characters can be vocalized in a plurality of ways, in multiple ways. And that's the real significance, because proponents of Lashon Kodash pretend that each character only has one pronunciation. But despite that being our case, we have never taken the position that everything that the evidence supports completely everything that's found in modern Israeli Hebrew, which is the straw man that Judah Natzarah attacks, and it's a gross straw man. I'm sorry. Again,
and honest, I don't find it at all surprising in the least bit that he does this kind of thing, because to be perfectly honest with you, while he seems to have some knowledge of certain things, he seems absolutely and positively ignorant of basically the topic as a whole. And I don't mean that as a point of disrespect to him. It's just an observation based on the way that he argues. But ultimately, I think the only thing that we can do is try to inform him and other incognizant individuals of this topic, you know, try to bring them up to speed to kind of get them away from such bad argumentation. Right now, I guess, you know, so would you say that's pretty much, you know, everything that we have to bring out?
Yeah,
or
I think we should pretty much wrap it up. I guess we could get to the, you know, to the end of it. Just the getting to the point, to the fact of the matter.
Right.
You know?
Right. And you know something, if we could actually, because I was going to bring this up earlier, but when I had Jay bring up the Yiddish and Hebrew and things of that nature, Jay, could you actually, in the same folder, can you actually pull up, let me actually tell you what you're going to pull up if you give me a second. Let's actually look at a few more examples of this whole, because again, the reason I think that this needs to be brought out is because you do have ignorant, I'm not saying this is necessarily Judah Natzarah or Torah Knights alone, but you have other individuals who hold to the dialect, in particular those who are one Westers in the, you know, specific camps like ISUPK, GMS, and the ones that actually do hold to the fraudulent dialect that Ariyah concocted at One West. They will make appeals to, for example, let me actually give me a moment. What they'll do is that, again, they continually make appeals to, you know, this idea that modern Israeli Hebrew and Yiddish are one and the same. So if you could, Jay, could you actually pull up the one that's Lashon Kodash 1 and then 2 and 3, because there's actually 3 of them, and we'll go through these. You know, again, lest the first example did not convince them, hopefully this will. All right. Now it says UPK and proponents of Lashon Kodash claim that this Hebrew phrase here is pronounced, and you could pronounce this because I'm not going to try. How would this be pronounced, Abu?
Yatazakak. Yeah, that's
Yatazakak.
In all fairness, the tzadeh, Judah Natzarah pronounces it za, not taza. One West claim that it's pronounced taza, which is the most ridiculous of all their claims, and we'll get into that in our series. But Judah Natzarah, to his credit, he rejected that most ridiculous of all their claims, and he pronounces it za. Nonetheless, this is something we made years ago, and Yitzhak, the name Isaac, is the traditional Lashon Kodash, not including Judah Natzarah's innovation, pronounces it Yatazachak.
Right. And yet here you have the Masoretic text, which pronounces it as Yishak, the Septuagint in the New Testament as Isaac, the Peshitta as Ishak, the Quran as
Ishak. In all those cases, the H is separate from the S.
Okay, right. And then the Vulgate and even the 1611 KJV as Isaac, which is still following the same convention. I guess what needs to be said is, were all these using so-called Yiddish?
Yeah.
Right. So, Jay, can you actually pull up the second slide real quick? And we'll just run through these very quickly. Abu, this sort of reasoning used by proponents of the faulty dialect, Lashawan Kodash, it only serves to highlight the fact that they're not actually researching this topic in depth. They're just parroting whatever they were taught. And so this is an interesting one, right? So UPKers and proponents of Lashawan Kodash claim that the Hebrew phrase that you see in front of you is pronounced
Yasha'Allah.
Right. So the Masoretic,
Go ahead.
Right. So the Masoretic text renders it as Yisrael, the Quran as Israel, the Greek Septuagint and New Testament as Israel, right? As Yisrael, Yisrael, the Vulgate as Israel, the 1611 KJV again Israel. And again, were all these sources using Yiddish too? Of course not, right?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. It's
clear that this is just.
Judah Natzarah also says he doesn't say Yashar Allah, he says Yasharel, which is again that brings us to the question: how does he pronounce the aleph? Is it ah or eh? But anyway, he says Yasharel, but it's basically the same thing. Yashar Allah. The thing is, we have evidence, ancient evidence, in the case of the Vulgate, even more ancient evidence in terms of the New Testament, and then the Septuagint. The Septuagint,
right?
Yeah, the Septuagint is the most ancient. Right. Then there's the New Testament. Then there's Vulgate. We have very ancient evidence. The Beshita is very ancient evidence as well. Although Judah Natzarah has shown that he tries to apply Lashawan Kodash logic to Arabic, so he could probably try to apply it to the Beshita as well. But whatever the case, we have very ancient, then medieval and pronunciations, and they're all basically lining up. Of course, there's slight differences, but first off, the reason the King James is included in there is because, not including Judah Natzarah, but generally the proponents of Lashawan Kodash, because they came out of One West, they were all King James onlyists, and so that's why it's also interesting there. Why did King James, was King James writing in Yiddish? Why did he put Israel? not King James, but his translators, the translators he commissioned. Right. And because they're always insisting. It's been, you'll have all these One Westers they'll hold up like a photocopy of a photocopy of a woodcut of King James and say, he kind of looks like Mayor Dinkins, therefore he was an Israelite, with the tacit argument. Therefore, he agrees with us on everything. Okay, fine. Right. Whatever you say. But the thing is, if this is Yiddish, why was he putting it in there? But anyway, that's why the King James is in there. But looking at the others, all of these others, they corroborate.
Before I forget this thought, it's interesting also to note, to kind of piggyback a little bit off what you're saying. The fact of the matter is that when they make the appeal to the King James, how did they get around the fact that, for example, the King James translators rendered, what's that Hebrew phrase that they would say for, oh man, it's like karabamya or something like that. Karama. Actually, hold on, how would they pronounce it? I actually have it around here.
Which verse is this?
So in, for example, when it talks about cherub or cherubims, right? So the King James translators saw the phrase cherubim, and then they added the s, not realizing that the im was actually a plural. So it begs the question: how? First and foremost, why were they transliterating it as cherubim, which goes
or cherubim? Maybe the ch is like the ch in character when it was written by the King James.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm saying they went with the Hebrew pronunciation.
The u and the e. Yeah. Why didn't they do karabawayim or something? Karawabayim. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Why didn't they use that sort of pronunciation for the the term cherub? Again, we see, for example, in fact, we see a bunch of Hebrew pronunciations, and it's not just the King James that does this.
Yeah, that's the point of this. They can reject the King James, but we're citing a bunch of sources that predate the Masoretic text. The Quran predates the Masoretic text by 3 centuries. Is that a coincidence that it lines up with it on this? The Beshita predates the Masoretic text by at least 6 centuries, maybe more, right? The Vulgate predates it by 6 centuries. The New Testament predates it by 10 centuries. And so how is it possible that they're lining up? Because the reason why this is significant is because the diacritics in the Masoretic text, and this is a point we've made over and over and over and over again, and proponents of Lashawan Kodash, including Judah Natzarah, just don't get it, or they're willfully ignorant on this. They pretend that like when the Masoretic text introduced the diacritics, that they introduced vocalizations. We give a more nuanced explanation, which is that the Masoretic text introduced the diacritics to represent vocalizations which have existed for centuries. They did not introduce the vocalizations, they introduced signs that represent these vocalizations. And the proof of that is that for centuries before the Masoretic text even appeared on the scene, people were already using these pronunciations. We're talking about stuff that predates the Common Era in the terms of the Septuagint.
But real quick, if we could, let's actually bring up Josephus, since we mentioned that earlier. I know that you have access to the Greek text of his writings. And again, it should let the audience out there know that, for example, I mean, even the mere fact that he chose the name Josephus, right? You know, which is the Greek transliteration of Yosef, right?
Mm-hmm.
Name Josephos, right? Josephos, Yosef, Josephos. I mean, just that alone, right? Here is an actual Israelite from antiquity who transliterates his own name in his writings. And when he renders, for example, the name Israel, he renders it Israel, right? He doesn't put Yasser Allah or whatever, you know, and that would have been very easy for someone like that to, you know, transliterate, incorporating just an A and an I vowel sound, which were both prevalent in the Greek, right? You have the A and the I in the Greek. Why was it that none of these different writers, whether it be ancient writers who adhered only to the Old Testament, such as Josephus, who was a Pharisee, or whether we're talking about guys like Philo of Alexandria, another one, about some of these other Jews in the diaspora, in all their external writings, whenever they transliterated or wrote anything in a foreign language, why did they never incorporate this so-called dialect? Why is this dialect absent in all of their writings? Why is there no hint at the pronunciation system that Ariah proposed? It's because it's all an invention of Ariah, who was ignorant of how Semitic languages actually work, or Shemitic languages, as Hebrew Israelites would prefer it be called. And these men simply are parroting. I'm talking about starting with the camps, and those who are influenced by the camps, they're simply just parroting what they heard the other guy say. And if you actually ask the person making the initial claim, there is none. It's all conjecture, right? It's really all. Well, Ariah claimed that he had some sort of visitation, you know, somehow that, you know, this was revealed to him. But then I find it ironic. Wasn't there someone else who also claimed to have a visitation that said that the dialect was wrong or something to that effect?
Yeah. Well, not the dialect, but although that probably happened as well. But yeah,
Right.
they'll get visitations from angels who give them a doctrine, and then they'll get corrections and through visitations. Like, for example, I mean, now admittedly, everyone outside of the ICGJC is going to reject this, but they had a legend. It may not have come out until after Yaquab died, but they had a legend within the ICGJC that that an angel came to Yaquab and told him, you know, like about 60% of the doctrine is wrong, you know, to prepare the congregation for all their doctrinal changes, you know.
Right. Well, I just got to say that, in all honesty, all of these breakdowns and different things were really based on men who were, one, influenced in part by Abba Bivens, you know, because Abba Bivens' introduction of the New Testament is really what ultimately leads to this. But they never really introduced the New Testament in and of itself for theological matters in terms of belief or anything. It was really just, you know, as you in many cases hear from former One Westers, that they weren't dealing with Christ, right? They'll typically you'll hear that from guys like Lahab and other individuals like that they'll openly tell you, we weren't dealing with Christ in the original school. Christ was an afterthought. Christ was only brought out whenever we had to use the color arguments, right? So it shouldn't be surprising that when it comes to the Hebrew language in and of itself, that the same strategies employed. Well, if they're teaching us this in the school, then we just go with what's being taught, right? Because it seemed to be the general rule of thumb is you did not question the breakdowns, right? If you question the breakdowns, then you were in danger of being kicked out of the school. That was always a big thing in the school, right? There was always this threat of being, you know, kicked out. And if you're kicked out of the school, then I guess the underlining belief is you're being kicked out of the truth. then ironically enough, all these guys end up having splits anyway. So it kind of begs the question: then did everybody kind of just leave the truth?
Yeah, everybody left One West. That's for sure. Yeah, nobody has the
Right.
building anymore.
Right. And not to mention the group that actually retained the building, the Israelite Church of God in Jesus Christ, doesn't even hold to the original, well, a lot of original doctrines in it. The ISUPK makes the claim that they're still holding on to the original, but even they don't hold on to the original doctrines. So if I could just, before we end this, I did want to kind of make mention of that. It's kind of like a side note. I find it ironic that the only guy, if you really want to be, if people out there want to see true blue One West teaching, even though it's wrong, I'm not at all advocating that that the breakdowns are right at all. But if you want to see the true blue original breakdowns as they, for the most part, were taught, Zabak is pretty much the only guy out there that's actually still teaching. I mean, he still teaches the trick bag doctrine, right? Which Cornelius being an Edomite, things of that nature, right? He's like the only guy out there, because if you ask some of these guys, like, members of the ISUPK and guys from the Israelite Church of God in Jesus Christ, of course, they'll both say that they're the original school. Now, if you want to be technical, the Israelite Church of God in Jesus Christ is the original school. But the only guy out there that's actually teaching the breakdowns as they were originally taught, for the most part, I'm sure he has deviations in certain areas. But if you want to find the most consistent, Zabak would be it.
That's
so there it is.
I bet if he hears this, on the one hand, he's going to be like, look, even they recognize it. But on the other hand, it might be like the kiss of death. All his rivals are going to be like, oh, he's off if they're saying it,
Right. But Abu, I definitely want to thank you. Oh, before we end this thing, we had one more thing. Now I want to make sure if we brought it out, because I'm just looking at it right now. In the folder, we actually had. Let me actually, if I could find it. Did we look at the matter, the fact of the matter?
No, we didn't get to that yet. I would love to look at that. I mean, it's just very simple.
Let's end it off on that one. Yeah. If we could go to that one. So, Brother Jay, if you could pull up the fact of the matter. There we go.
Yeah,
this would probably.
This was just to boil it down, really, because this is the thing. We're admittedly, when we corresponded with Judah Natzarah, it was all over the place, and we covered a bunch of different subjects here. But let's boil it down to the most salient points. So, if Judah Natzarah wants to find something to focus on, if he's going to respond to this, then this would be it. And this is what we write here. We've appealed to ancient evidence in the form of ancient transliterations predating Yiddish or the Masoretic text by centuries. The ancient evidence shows that each character can be vocalized in multiple ways, including vocalizations which Judah Natzarah rejects. Judah has not shown any ancient evidence. That's the fact of the matter. That's the most salient point here. That's the real dispute. Pronunciation, whether or not characters can be vocalized in multiple ways, and whether or not those include vocalizations which Judah Natzarah rejects and which proponents of Lashon Kodash rejects, right? And like I said, we're going to do a series on Lashon Kodash where we'll have different segments where we'll get into more detail. But this is, for me, this is really the big issue. We consistently appeal to ancient evidence. We've been doing it for, Faithful's been doing it for what, 3-4 years now, if I'm not mistaken, maybe more. How long have you been doing this on Lashon Kodash specifically?
Yeah.
At least 4 years.
I want to say right.
At least 4 years. I've been doing this for quite a while. I think the first piece I wrote on this subject goes back like 13 years or something like that, or maybe more, and it's consistently come to this. For quite some time, I've been hitting different proponents of Lashon Kodash with the ancient evidence, with the transliterations in the New Testament and the Vulgate and the Septuagint, and that shows that the ancient evidence is on the side of our position, our nuanced position. They present no evidence. They just present an alternative system of pronunciation and put it out there like a brute fact, like you have to just accept what they say on faith. And Judah Natzarah plays this game as well. He'll pretend like he's finding sources which, support him, but really what he does is if he finds something that seems to agree in part with him, he'll say, well, there you go, it's right there. But when it disagrees with him, they were going off, they don't know what they're talking about, they got corrupted by Yiddish,
Right.
Which is just, it's complete, confirmation bias. He's just doing that with stuff he found on the internet or something like that, for the most part. What he hasn't done is he hasn't appealed to any sort of ancient evidence. And that's the real issue. We appeal to ancient evidence. None of the proponents of Lashon Kodash do that. They ignore our evidence and they don't present any counter evidence. But the ancient evidence is on our side. Period. End of sentence.
That's right. And I think that with that's pretty much it. I'm actually gonna let the brother Jay. I definitely want to thank him for all the help tonight. Brother Jay, man, if you could actually get on the mic, man, you could stop presenting, brother. Before we end things, I definitely want you to kind of let people out there know where they can find you. Also, if they want to, check out some of your tracks and different things of that nature. Yeah, man, go right ahead.
Yeah, brothers, just want to reach out to me. You can either do it, subscribe to my brother Jay YouTube account, BROTHA in the letter J, or you can go on Facebook, type in brother J, BROTHA in the letter J. You guys will see my picture pop up. And also on the music side, I'm known as Jay the Producer, the letter J, then THE Producer. My website is www.jaytheproducer.com. That's where that's kind of the central hub for me. But you can type that name in on YouTube or Instagram, etc. If you want to follow me there, stay up to date, especially I'll be posting little clips, and sometimes I go live with me working in the studio on this album. So if you want to follow that kind of process or whatever the case is, go ahead and subscribe, and so you get an update when I go live again to work on the project live. So that's how you guys can reach me. And just hit me in my inbox if you got any questions. The brother Jared, I sent you. I gave you the name to look up. I think the brother Faithful sent you the link directly to my page, so you can reach out to me so we can talk about those 2 comments that you put under the box.
That's right. Thank you, my brother. Abu, how can people reach you? And if they'd like to have a dialogue on this particular topic, which, by the way, for this video, I'm going to keep the comment section open. Hopefully a discourse can happen that way. But if not, if people don't feel comfortable doing it on YouTube, how can they actually get in contact with you?
Well, they contact me also on Twitter, Abu Khamer, and then I can also be found on Vocab's forum, or just contact Vocab. Vocab actually recently helped the gentleman who's trying to get in contact with me. They contacted Vocab, and he put the guy in contact with me. But also Twitter, I can easily be found on Twitter, ABU KHAMR, Abu Khamer. And or just if they see my screen name, Abu Khamer al-Masihi or Abu Khamer, I'm also on YouTube and so on. Yeah. But and also, like you said, the comment section of this video, I would love to discuss it with anyone who's interested. But over the years, we've found the proponents of Lashwa and Kodash don't really want to discuss this.
All right. Definitely want to thank you for all the information that you brought out tonight, and definitely found it to be very informative, even on my end. And I would hope that others out there who are holding to that viewpoint would also find it informative and would look into basically the bad arguments that they're parroting, that they would critically examine them as much as they claim that they critically examine everything else. And yeah, man, we're definitely going to have a series on this topic. Looking forward to that. Lord willing, it'll happen soon. And want to thank the listening audience out there. And for Judah Natzarah, I'll leave you with these parting words. I would hope, rebuttal to this video, that you would actually engage our arguments, and that you would also deal with the things that we presented in the first video. We would hopefully like to see you counter it with tangible, factual evidence, not just conjecture, not your feelings on the topic, but actual evidence. And hopefully we can have a discourse and let the people out there decide which one of us is actually presenting the truth. All right. With that being said, I want to thank everybody. God bless you all. I hope this has edified someone out there, and take care.